Hi, welcome to my channel, Reader Woman. My name's Judy, and let's talk some more about Little Women. I've had a lot to say about it. I've had a part one and a part two. And now I want to talk about Beth. I've seen the current, I saw the Greta Gerwig version twice in the movie theater. I have seen the mini-series from 2017, and I've read the book. So I've cried a lot about Beth's death. And it has been, I don't know, it just hasn't been something I've been able to just go by or, pass on beyond Beth. I think we all have a pretty good idea of who Meg is, who Jo is, and particularly who Amy is. But when it comes to Beth, I don't know. She is a difficult character. One of the auxiliary books that I just got done finishing was, let's see here, yeah, not the best, but Meg, Jo, Beth and Amy, and gosh, what's her name? Anne Boyd Rioux. And I started it last year, I have to say. It was fascinating. I made it like halfway through, and then I just kind of got bored. There's just so much I can take on everything Little Women. And I really had just gotten to the point where if I had to listen to yet another person saying a little snippet about Little Women in like the past 100, 150 years, I'd had enough. I couldn't take it anymore. So, but after I got done reading the novel again, I thought, well, maybe I should finish the book. And Sonia at The Enthusiastic Reader had suggested it to me. And by that time I'd already read half of it. But, it kind of put it back on my radar. The one thing she had to say about Beth that took me by surprise is she was wondering if Beth might not have been anorexic. Which you're kind of like, But when I was reading the book, in the book, the family called the doctor when Beth had, was it scarlet fever? Had this disease. They called in the doctor. And then, they ended up, because she just wasn't getting well, they had to go and send a telegram for Marmee to come home. And so, you knew Beth wasn't in the best of health. But when, so that was when she was, let's see here, 13, 14. And now she's like 20, and she's not thriving. And the one thing that got me was, I'm sorry, I always do that. Move forward and then back. But what really got me was Jo made all this money, and a good portion of the money she made, both from her articles and publishing that book. I mean, the first time, I think with the book money, she sent Marmee and Beth to the seashore to try and get her feeling better, more alive, I guess. And then the second time, she took Beth. I didn't really think about it until I was watching the little mini-series. And they made the point of calling the doctor for the 20-year-old Beth, which there was no mention of a doctor in the novel. And so you're kind of going, well, why is Beth why isn't Beth getting medical treatment? I mean, there was this great, I don't have it, unfortunately, but a great New Yorker cartoon that was just like, here's what Beth needs, penicillin. But, reading this book by Rioux, I am putting it in my head that maybe she had an eating disorder, which of course at that time was never talked about. But it made me feel a little icky too. Because was this a young woman who could have been saved? And how would it have been possible in that day and age to have saved her? And how, I won't say easily, but how her family just let her slip away. I know that Louise May Alcott, which, that's probably one of the things I'll be doing next, is actually reading a biography or her letters or something to get a little bit more perspective. But I have invested a lot of tears into Beth. A lot of tears. In fact, I think that, when I went in right after Christmas for the first time to see the Greta Gerwig 2019 version of Little Women, my emotions were so high. I could almost have broken out in tears immediately before it had even started. And I've always just felt so sad that Beth died. And then to have this author put it in my head, well, maybe she had anorexia. And then thinking back and realizing how little the family tried, outside of going to these 2 expensive trips to the seashore, how little it was documented that they did for her. My father had tuberculosis in the early 40s, and before penicillin was readily available. And before it was called tuberculosis, it was called consumption. But Beth doesn't show any signs of coughing herself, spitting up blood from her coughing. Her lungs just disintegrating in her body. That wasn't the case. It was more of a wasting away. And so my real query with Beth is, what the heck was going on? I don't know. I'm just, I'm just exploring it verbally, because she has been a very pivotal character for me since I was a little girl. While I always wanted to be Jo, I always knew I was a little bit more like Beth. I wasn't the I wasn't the pretty one wanting to go out to parties and all of that, like Meg. But Meg and I have some things in common. I'm an older child, the oldest of 2. And so, yeah, some of Meg's moralizing, and it's like, yeah, you gotta follow me now and do what I say, because I'm now a mom, while mom's gone. And it's like, I could understand that. There are real aspects of Meg that drew me. But as a reader, I always had the dream of writing novels, and I always wanted to be Jo, but I knew I never was. It just wasn't me. But a little bit more quiet, shy, not as shy as Beth, but and there was one other thing I wanted to say, because watching all these versions all at this, in a short period of time, some of it's hard to remember where what was. But when it comes to Beth dying, in that little 2017 mini series, the Masterpiece Theater. I'm sorry I don't have the names of everybody. But Marmee breaks down in Joe's arms when Beth dies. And talks about how guilty she feels that of all of her daughters, Beth was the one she never had plans for. She never was planning for her to get married. She was never planning for her to, you know, do something like with her music. I mean, she sounds like she was a lovely musician. She might have, you know, played with the Concord Philharmonic. I mean, you know what I'm saying. Which I thought was interesting. And yeah, I just all of a sudden have really started questioning who the heck was Beth. And outside of being the quiet, sweet one, did Louisa May Alcott know who Beth was? You know, I don't say it's a definitive answer that Beth had anorexia. But I mean, even back then, you know, when people got sick, they called doctors, they got second opinions, they went to specialists. I mean, I remember Little House on the Prairie. Similar. But, you know, when Mary goes blind, you know, they have at least a doctor involved. So yeah, I just am really wondering about Beth. Really wondering about Beth. And I've also been thinking too, because of how it was such a vibrant cast of sisters. Beth was definitely the less vibrant, the less colorful, you know, she always hung back when everybody else was putting themselves forward. But was she, oh, I lost my train of thought. And I don't edit, so you're stuck with this brain fart, sorry. What was I trying to say? Well, just the question of Beth. I mean, everyone always expected her to be an old maid and to stay home and take care of their parents. You know, I think even Beth expected that. But where was that push to get her healthy? And I would have to say, just as a guess, and I could be totally wrong, and tell me if I am, I would guess that she was, that Louisa May Alcott just really didn't know, you know, maybe their family at that time didn't have enough money for a doctor. I don't know, but I mean, with heart problems, you can last a long time. You know, you have to lower your physical output, but I mean, as we know from the book, you know, she was doing sewing and throwing things out the window for little kids who didn't have mittens, so she was sewing, knitting, until she wasn't able to. Oh, and I have remembered what I had forgotten. And the big thing, ultimately for me, I think why I cry every time Beth dies is the fact of Joe being left alone. And the understanding that the magic of sisterhood is over. At least that magical time of being sisters, living under one roof, and fighting and putting on plays and, you know, being children. It's the end of childhood. It's the end of really young adulthood. It's finding yourself without the person you love the most in the world, which is a very, very hard thing. So, so I think the grief I have over Beth is probably more when Jo realizes how alone she really is. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Beth. If you have any, let me know. If you have any recommendations for bios or letters or something like that of Louisa May Alcott, I'd love to know. I'm definitely still obsessed. Not quite as much as I was last week, but definitely thinking of more things to say about it. Hope you're having a great reading evening, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.